The world once crowned her the Princess of Pop. Britney Spears, a small-town girl from Louisiana, turned into a global phenomenon with just one song. Stadiums exploded when she stepped on stage. Millions of records vanished from shelves in days, and the international press hailed her as the brightest star of the new millennium. But behind the blinding lights, a disturbing truth remained hidden. For over 13 years, Britney wasn't allowed to make the most basic decisions about her own life. Her multi-million-dollar fortune, her relentless tours, even choices about love, children, and medicine. Everything was controlled by her father, Jamie Spears. The woman who once sang about freedom was living under a system so suffocating it stripped her of her humanity. To the public, Britney embodied glamour, rebellion, and female power. Yet behind the curtain, she was nothing more than a puppet. A voice permitted to sing only when told, a body moved by orders not her own, a soul cornered until it nearly collapsed. Millions believed she had it all: wealth, fame, adoration. But behind the smile that lit up the stage was a tragedy the world had never fully heard. And the truth behind it is much darker. Britney Jean Spears was born on December 2nd, 1981, in the small town of Macomb, Mississippi, but grew up in Kentwood, Louisiana, a place far removed from the dazzling lights of Hollywood. Her beginnings were modest, surrounded by the Southern values of church, community, and family. Yet even in this quiet corner of America, turbulence lurked inside her home. Her father, Jamie Spears, struggled with alcoholism and financial instability, while her mother, Lynn, did her best to hold the family together. The constant tension at home created an atmosphere of uncertainty. For young Britney, music became more than a hobby. It became an escape. Singing in the local Baptist church choir and performing in school talent shows, she discovered that when she sang, the world around her seemed to stop hurting. By the age of 3, she was already performing in dance recitals. At 8, she auditioned for the Mickey Mouse Club. Although she was considered too young, producers immediately recognized her raw talent. They encouraged her to train further, and soon, Britney's mother was taking her back and forth to New York for vocal lessons, auditions, and off-Broadway productions. It wasn't an easy childhood. Unlike other kids her age who played freely, Britney spent countless hours rehearsing. She enrolled at the Professional Performing Arts School in New York City, honing her skills in dance, acting, and singing. Her voice coach would later recall, Britney wasn't just talented, she had that rare fire, a drive that separated her from the others. But the sacrifices were immense. Being pushed into the entertainment industry meant Britney grew up faster than most children. She experienced rejection, the constant scrutiny of auditions, and the early taste of how cruel show business could be. And at the same time, she carried the heavy responsibility of being the family's hope for a better life. When she finally joined the Mickey Mouse Club in 1992, alongside future stars like Justin Timberlake, Christina Aguilera, and Ryan Gosling, Britney was just 11 years old. It should have been pure fun, but even then she felt the pressure of competition. Behind the smiles and rehearsals, producers whispered about who would make it big and who would fade into obscurity. Britney's natural charisma put her at the forefront, but the weight of expectation was already pressing down on her small shoulders. Her childhood was a paradox, filled with opportunity, yet deprived of normalcy. She was adored on stage, but lonely off it. As her peers lived carefree lives, Britney was already learning the harsh lesson that in entertainment, nothing is ever truly yours. Not your time, not your privacy, not even your identity. This early molding of talent sharpened under pressure, of innocence lost too soon, set the stage for everything that would follow. Britney wasn't just a child star. She was a child soldier in the war of fame, disciplined and dazzling, but already carrying scars that the public couldn't see. By the mid-1990s, Britney Spears was standing at the edge of a cultural revolution she didn't yet realize she would lead. After the Mickey Mouse Club ended in 1994, many of its young cast members faded back into ordinary life. But Britney was restless. Returning to Louisiana felt like stepping backward, and though she was just a teenager, she already knew she was destined for something bigger. At 15, she auditioned for record labels in New York. Executives were struck by the contradiction. A petite Southern girl with a voice that carried both innocence and raw power. One Jive Records executive later admitted, "We saw it immediately. She had that spark, the kind you can't manufacture." Soon after, Britney signed with Jive, and everything began to accelerate. Her debut single, Baby One More Time, released in late 1998, was more than just a hit, it was a cultural detonation. The image of the 16-year-old in a schoolgirl outfit, dancing down a hallway, burned itself into the memory of an entire generation. The song topped charts in over 20 countries, and her debut album sold more than 10 million copies in the United States alone. Overnight, Britney Spears became not just famous, but iconic. Yet with superstardom came suffocating demands. Endless interviews, world tours, and photo shoots turned her life into a whirlwind. Paparazzi followed her every move. Tabloids dissected her every outfit, her body, her relationships. At just 17, she was hailed as the most recognizable teenager on the planet. But beneath the gloss, tiny cracks began to show. In interviews, Britney smiled and giggled, yet she often admitted she was exhausted. Her management team pushed her to keep going. New albums, bigger tours, more exposure. Rest was a luxury she could not afford. You don't say no when the world is at your feet, one insider recalled. The early 2000s saw her career soar even higher. Albums like Oops, I Did It Again and Britney sold millions, cementing her as the reigning princess of pop. She performed at the MTV Video Music Awards with a snake draped across her shoulders, kissed Madonna on stage, and became the headline of every entertainment magazine. Britney wasn't just a singer. She was a cultural lightning rod, shaping fashion, music, and the very image of celebrity. But fame of that magnitude is never gentle. The media's obsession quickly turned invasive. Her relationship with Justin Timberlake was celebrated, then mercilessly dissected after their breakup. Her every romantic link became tabloid fodder, painting her alternately as America's sweetheart and the industry's villain. The pressure was relentless and the scrutiny merciless. Still, Britney continued to perform. She smiled, she danced, she delivered perfection on stage. But offstage, she began showing signs of strain. Close friends described her as increasingly anxious, sometimes breaking down in tears before shows. She was young, rich, and adored, but privately, she was already unraveling under the weight of her own success. Her rise to fame had been meteoric, breathtaking, and unprecedented. But like every meteoric rise, it carried a silent warning. What burns brightest is also what burns out the fastest. And for Britney Spears, the fall was coming, faster and harder than anyone could imagine. By 2004, the fairy tale image of Britney Spears had begun to fracture. Years of relentless touring, constant media attention, and the suffocating demands of superstardom were taking their toll. To the world, she was still the glittering princess of pop. But behind closed doors, Britney was spiraling. Her whirlwind marriage to childhood friend Jason Alexander lasted only 55 hours, a bizarre episode that tabloids devoured like vultures. Soon after, she married dancer Kevin Federline, a union that brought 2 children, but also intense public scrutiny. Paparazzi chased her everywhere, outside gas stations, through parking lots, even swarming her car as she drove with her baby on her lap. Each misstep was amplified into a scandal. The pressure mounted, and cracks widened into collapse. In 2007, the world watched in collective shock as Britney walked into a Los Angeles salon and shaved her head. It was an act of rebellion, defiance, and despair all at once. Cameras flashed, headlines screamed, "Britney has lost it." In that moment, her humanity was stripped away. She was no longer a woman in pain. She was a spectacle. The spiral deepened. A series of public breakdowns followed, attacking paparazzi with an umbrella, custody battles over her children, erratic appearances in court. Each incident painted her as unstable, unfit, and broken. The same media that had once worshipped her now fed on her downfall, turning Britney Spears into late-night comedy fodder. And then came the conservatorship. In 2008, after multiple psychiatric holds, a court granted her father, Jamie Spears, legal control over her finances, career, and personal decisions. What was supposed to be a temporary arrangement became a 13-year cage. Under this system, Britney could still tour the world, perform nightly shows in Las Vegas, and generate hundreds of millions of dollars. But she had no right to choose what medication she took, whom she dated, or even whether she could have more children. Behind the curtain, she lived under constant surveillance. Former employees would later claim her phone was monitored, her home bugged, her autonomy erased. She was forced to take medication she didn't want, denied simple freedoms like driving her car, and allegedly compelled to perform against her will. To the public, Britney continued to smile on stage, dazzling audiences with polished routines. But fans who looked closer began to notice something was off. The vacant look in her eyes, the robotic repetition of her words in interviews, the eerie silence on topics that mattered most. By the late 2010s, whispers of injustice grew louder. Loyal fans began dissecting her Instagram posts, convinced they contained hidden messages, pleas for help disguised as quirky dances, and cryptic captions. Free Britney movement was born, demanding answers about the true nature of her conservatorship. At first, many dismissed it as a conspiracy theory, but soon, undeniable cracks in the facade began to show. Britney Spears, once the most powerful pop star on the planet, had been reduced to a controlled commodity. Her downfall wasn't just personal, it was systemic. A young woman who had given everything to the world of entertainment was now trapped, stripped of the very freedom she had sung about in her youth. The Princess of Pop was living a life more like a prisoner. By 2020, the whispers had turned into roars. The Free Britney movement, once dismissed as fan obsession, had become a global outcry. Protesters gathered outside courthouses holding pink posters, chanting for her freedom. Documentaries like Framing Britney Spears exposed the darker truths of her conservatorship to mainstream audiences. Suddenly, the world realized that the pop star they had adored for decades had been living under a legal cage for more than 13 years. And then came Britney's own voice. On June 23, 2021, she stood before a Los Angeles court and delivered a 24-minute testimony that shocked the world. Her words were raw, trembling, and furious. "I've been in denial. I've been in shock. I am traumatized. I just want my life back." She revealed she had been forced to take lithium against her will, a drug that left her feeling drunk and disoriented. She testified that she was not allowed to remove an IUD, preventing her from having more children. She said she was forced to work, performing shows she didn't want to do, while her family profited from her labor. For the first time, the public heard the truth directly from her lips, and it was darker than anyone had imagined. The testimony was a breaking point. Millions around the globe reacted in horror and outrage. Celebrities voiced support, politicians called for reform, and fans intensified their protests. The Princess of Pop had revealed herself not as a diva, but as a captive. Months later, in November 2021, a judge finally ended the conservatorship. The moment was cathartic. Outside the courthouse, fans wept, cheered, and held signs that read, "She's free." Britney herself posted a simple but powerful message, "Best day ever." Yet freedom came with scars. 13 years of control had left deep wounds. Britney spoke openly about her trauma, admitting she feared the world would never truly understand what she endured. Though she was legally free, the damage was irreparable. The lost years, the stolen autonomy, the betrayal of family. Her tragedy was not just personal, it was public. Millions had watched her breakdowns, laughed at her misfortunes, consumed the gossip that fueled her captivity. In hindsight, her suffering was magnified by an industry and a culture that thrived on tearing her apart. The climax of Britney's story was not a glamorous award show or a chart-topping album. It was a woman, once the most famous entertainer in the world, standing in a courtroom, begging simply to live her own life. And that plea became one of the most haunting moments in modern pop culture history. Britney Spears' story is more than just a pop saga. It is a mirror reflecting the cost of fame, the failures of justice, and the resilience of a woman who refused to be silenced. For decades, she was celebrated for her music, her beauty, her ability to command a stage. But what the world now remembers just as vividly is her struggle to reclaim the most basic of human rights, freedom. The hashtag Free Britney movement became more than a fan campaign. It turned into a symbol of resistance against abuse of power, especially within systems meant to protect. Britney's ordeal exposed the dark side of conservatorships, sparking national debates and legislative reforms in the United States. Her voice, once polished and rehearsed for pop perfection, became raw and unfiltered, resonating with survivors of control, exploitation, and silencing. Today, Britney remains both fragile and fierce. She may never fully escape the scars of those lost years, but her survival is itself a triumph. Her legacy is not just the unforgettable hits or iconic performances. It is the cautionary tale she leaves behind, a reminder that even the brightest stars can be caged and that freedom is never guaranteed, even for the most powerful. We loved her as the Princess of Pop, but behind the makeup and the spotlight, Britney Spears was always just a woman, fighting desperately to be seen, to be heard, and to simply live.